Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews. Dan, joined as always by Chris.
Hello.
Go on. Oh, you said hello.
Saying hi.
Sorry, I thought you were like trying to interrupt to correct me on something. I thought I'd said something wrong. I was like, what have I done?
No. Just saying hi to my peeps.
This is a podcast where we review old movies from our youth that we enjoyed and suspect. Well, it's different. Sometimes we suspect they hold up. Sometimes we suspect they won't hold up. This week we're tackling the 1998 Eddie Murphy comedy Dr. Dolittle, and I have to ask straight away, Chris, before we get into like the nitty gritty, what did you think you were going to experience going back into this? Did you think this would hold up? Like if I'd have said to you, put money on the outcome, does this hold up, or is this a bit of a mess? What would you have said prior to watching it?
I don't know if I'd have known because I didn't think. Because sometimes, as you know, sometimes you just pick a film like you just go, oh yeah, I remember that film. And
Sure.
my sort of, we do our sort of history with the film. My history with Dr. Dolittle, it turns out, is incredibly overshadowed by two things. One is one of, still to this day, my dearest friends. We got sat next to each other on a school trip, on a bus trip in like year 6, so it would have been like 9, 10. And she was putting her head against the window. And she was like, "Oh, the vibrations are always a bit weird, aren't they?" And I went, "Yeah, it's like that scene in Dr. Dolittle where the hamster or the gerbil, whatever it is, hamster, I think, where the hamster is on the vibrating thing, and the hamster goes, and then she in unison went, 'This feels good,' and it was like a bonding moment. We laughed and we became friends, Dan, and we are, I spoke at her wedding. We are still very good friends now, and So I always think, I can't think of this film without thinking of her and of that. And one Christmas, I really, really wanted, but was outright told that I wasn't getting a DVD player. Like, literally, I'm sure it wasn't this bad. But my memory is my mum and dad being like, just to clarify, that shit's too expensive. You're not getting it. I think because they'd already got me something else. So I went into Christmas Day not getting a DVD player. They found a DVD player somewhere cheap enough to be able to justify buying me one, or maybe they got something else for my sister, I don't know. But they'd already purchased everything I wanted on video. So they got me Dr. Dolittle and Dr. Dolittle 2 in a box set, and those were the only DVDs I owned for a fair few weeks. So again, that's a very warm memory, the surprise DVD player. Not too many people had a DVD player. It was very exciting. So, turns out, watching the film, very clouded by those memories. If you'd have said to me, does it hold up? I'd have gone, I don't know. I expect so. Probably. It's probably an all right family film. Which it kind of is. Is it amazing? No. Would I voluntarily watch it again? Probably not. If I had a kid and it was on TV, and they said, "Can we watch Dr. Dolittle?" I'd go, "Yeah, all right." Like, it's definitely got its flaws. We'll talk about it. But it killed an hour and whatever, which is probably what I would have predicted.
Right. So your prediction would have been, it's probably just okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But I will admit that is biased from having watched the film. I wasn't thinking too much about its quality. It was just a film from my childhood for the reasons just outlaid.
I think I would have predicted it was going to be real bad. So I was pleasantly surprised that it was okay, because I agree.
You very vocally on this podcast went, "Oh, fucking hell."
Yeah.
when I picked it. So you didn't. You did predict that, Dan.
Yeah. I mean, okay, you got me. That's right. I very much did. I think if I'd have been putting money on it, I'd have said I'm probably going to dislike this movie quite strongly. And I do think that impression is not necessarily the film's fault. And I imagine most kids didn't give a shit about this, but I was an unusual child because a lot of people got introduced to Eddie Murphy through his more family-friendly films, from our generation, through his more family-friendly films later in the 90s, right? You know, he started doing movies like this, and even to some extent, The Nutty Professor, which is kind of on the line, I think. I think a lot of kids saw that, even though it isn't directly a kid's film, if that makes sense. But,
another one I had on video, yeah.
Yeah, while I acknowledge that this is properly a family film, Nutty Professor probably wasn't. Nutty Professor was sort of borderline halfway between a family film because of some of its like sense of humor, and halfway between this essentially. But I grew up with a parent who was a big Eddie Murphy fan. My dad loved Eddie Murphy and had cassettes of Delirious and Raw that he very selectively chose parts of for me to listen to. And then I grew up on a diet of films that I probably shouldn't have been watching at the age I was. So I saw 48 Hours, I saw Trading Places, I saw all the Beverly Hills Cops, particularly Beverly Hills Cop 3, I saw a lot. Golden Child, Coming to America, like all these classic Eddie Murphy films were a big part of my youth, you know. So Dr. Dolittle is like, I have a certain expectation for what an Eddie Murphy film is, and this ain't it. But I think that's unfair, because I think that's a kid brain not understanding that people can do different things, and not all their movies need to follow the same logic, tone, style. You know,
because I mean, you know, you weren't wrong. It's not Coming to America, but obviously as an adult, you appreciate more that it equally wasn't trying to be. Coming to America.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. You can't. I think a lot of people go through that era when they're a kid, when they start realizing that not everything is great. You know, there's a certain age when you don't care. If it's a TV show, a movie, whatever it is, you fucking love it. And there's nothing going to change your mind, no matter how bad it is. You know, and I do think a lot of that weird generation now that seem to really like the Star Wars prequels were that age when they came out. Whereas I was slightly older than that when the prequels came out. And even as a kid was like, this doesn't seem right. Like, I couldn't put my finger on the Star Wars prequels and why I didn't love them. But I could tell it wasn't hitting the same button for whatever reason, you know, and I certainly wouldn't have been able to identify that reason. That's, you know, years of TV watching and, you know, studying screenwriting and like doing all these podcasts where we review things. That's sort of where that brain ends up coming from. But certainly as a child, you don't realize why you don't like something. But I remember finding this particularly puerile. I wouldn't have used that word, but I remember this is like a baby film. Like, what is this? You know, it's lots of fart jokes and Eddie Murphy being silly. And the irony of that is, it probably was around the time I was mad into Jim Carrey movies that were exactly that. It's just because I had unfair expectations of what an Eddie Murphy film was, that this was never going to satiate. You know what I mean? Like, this movie was never going to scratch the itch that young me wanted it to scratch. And that's not this film's fault at all.
No, in your slight defense, I mean, we'd have to, and I assume at some point we will, but it probably isn't as good as, well, it's certainly not as good as the big guns for Jim Carrey, you know, The Mask, Ace Ventura. Mm-hmm. In my memory, Liar Liar is also better than this, which is perhaps a fairer comparison.
Yeah, Liar Liar is on my list for this. I love that movie so much. It's almost peak Jim Carrey.
That's a fairer comparison to this. So to be fair to you, I don't think it's as good as some of those Jim Carrey examples. But I assume rewatching it, you're the same as me. You're like, yeah, I mean, it's fine.
Yeah, it's cool. It's pleasantly enjoyable. Like, it's not a masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination, but the story is reasonably coherent. The performances are all really good. It's reasonably creative. Eddie Murphy particularly is surprisingly good at this manic. Like, there's the section of the movie in the middle where he's where it's all first getting on top of him and he's going a bit mad, and all the other characters are starting to think he's going mad, and he has to sort of play it a bit more manic as he's dealing with it all, because it's all a bit much for him. He handles that really well, and that is something usually you would only turn to an actor like Jim Carrey to do, and it certainly didn't really fit what he'd done previously. I mean, calm and collected, generally speaking, shouty sometimes and energetic for sure, but panicked and like it was all getting on top of him wasn't really a trait, I don't think, of any Eddie Murphy movies that I can recall. I suppose actually, I don't know. Think about like 48 Hours and stuff. He kind of played that like out of his depth. But generally speaking, you look at like movies like Beverly Hills Cop, which are the ones I watched the most when I was a kid of Eddie Murphy's back catalogue. You know, he's always in control, always calm, always cool. You know, so it's a very different tone for him in this one. And he does a really good job. And you know what? I think the special effects are surprisingly good. I didn't think I'd say that. I think the choice to use actual animals mixed with a couple of animatronics and then like digitally adjust the mouths to make them move actually ends up being more convincing than if they'd used CGI at the time. You know?
Yeah,
if these had been CGI monstrosities, they would have aged so poorly right now. But they actually, I wouldn't say hold up, but they function.
It sometimes felt, especially with Chris, and we're going into kind of the weeds now and more kind of spoiler territory.
So we should say if we recommend it or not.
Yeah. So okay. So I think if you're after a family film and you haven't seen it and you err on the side of slapstick, fart humor, then sure. Like, I think it could get a Sunday afternoon.
It's a perfectly inoffensive family movie with a surprisingly creative approach and some reasonably good performances and a couple of good jokes. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it at all. It's fine. It is so down the middle. It's hard to even. I mean, there are problems with it, but like, there's nothing like egregious. It just mostly just works. Like, yeah, it's kind of hard to criticize it, because there isn't anything majorly wrong with it. So I think I would say as well, if that sounds like something you're looking for, then yeah, I recommend it. Should you, a person who's watching all sorts of other stuff and doesn't have any particular interest in, check this out? Probably not, in reality.
No.
But anyone who likes kind of the sound of that, or has a place in their life for a family movie, yeah, it's fine. You'll enjoy yourself. It's only an hour and 20 minutes. It's inoffensive. It's fine.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. And so that's kind of the recommendation. And also I think that caveat of if that's your jam, that sort of applies to most family films apart from like the Die Hard classics. So I think that's a reasonable kind of caveat for us to say. Mm-hmm. In terms of, whilst it's sometimes, getting into the weeds a bit more, whilst it's sometimes, especially with Chris Rock's hamster, felt like the hamster wasn't actually, it didn't quite feel like Eddie Murphy and Chris Rock were in sync, and I know they probably weren't, and like often that's the case with voiceover acting. Bradley Cooper is not actually talking to Chris Pratt in Guardians, but it does feel like he is more than it did. It was like the pitch was a bit wrong. But in terms of the actual, this is going to potentially make some people gasp, but in terms of the actual making the animals talk, I'm sorry, a lot of it's better than the last Jon Favreau Lion King. Like, it is. Like, it feels more realistic. The animals don't look as cool, but you buy their talking a bit more, I think, in some cases. Is that fair, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they don't hold up side by side, but I do think there is, because of the use of them being real animals, they do feel more tangible. They do feel more present than the fully CGI creations. Because there's still a slight uncanny valleyness to completely CGI creatures, beings, humans. Anything living, they struggle to do in CGI because there's a certain weight and way that muscles and people move. And while they've gotten very good at it, they've still not 100% cracked it. Like, I remember I saw the Jon Favreau Lion King in like the Leicester Square, the big screen they do all the premieres in with their fancy new laser projector. And I remember, because it's so enlarged, there was a scene where it cuts back and it's almost like a scenic scene, but you can see Simba and Nala in the bottom corner of the shot hopping onto some rocks. It's like an establishing shot, right? And I remember watching him hop onto the rock, and on a screen that big, just going like, that looked floaty and weird. Like, my eye immediately recognized the fakery, because there's no tangible weight to him, and if you can't animate the weight convincingly, it's tricky. They're getting better at it. Like, I find that they've gotten better with humans over the years. Like, I remember looking at like those Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, or even some of the Andrew Garfield ones, and there are scenes when he leaps off a roof and it just, the weight doesn't work. Like, the physics of it don't fit, and my eyes notice. Whereas in the Tom Holland ones, I feel less of that. Generally speaking, the physics work, so it's certainly improving. So it's hard to compare the two because they're such different approaches. But I think 10 years from now, the Favreau stuff still might stick out more in your mind than some of this Doctor Dolittle stuff. I don't necessarily think that means it's better or worse. They're so different and hard to compare. But yeah, I was surprised how well these special effects held up. And it is, I think, the difference between something tangibly in the scene and something not. The movie does, on the other hand, though, have another problem, which is because Eddie Murphy is terrified of animals, a lot of the time he's not in the actual scene with them IRL, because he was scared of them, and any scenes where he would be in with them, then they did film it that way, he would end up screaming and not finishing his dialogue. So as a result, the movie has a lot of compositing, which actually hurts it. So you can look at the animal in an individual shot and go, this actually convincingly looks like it's moving around, talking, and it's not perfect. The mouth moves. Sometimes it's a bit wonky or whatever. It doesn't quite match the vocals of the actor or whatever. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. But it's spoiled by the fact the animal has had to be pasted into a scene he clearly wasn't originally in. And that is mostly evident with the lion. I feel, not the lion, sorry, the tiger, I feel. But there are many scenes where the animals are pasted in and the compositing is kind of wonky. That's unfortunate.
Surely there comes a point where that affects your decision if you're Eddie Murphy and whether you take the role.
But I mean, I guess, unless in the negotiations they just really thought Eddie Murphy was how you sell the movie, so they were willing to bend to his requests, and he was just like, as little animal interaction with me as possible, please. Wherever you can cheat, please do that.
Yeah, I guess.
And for whatever reason, they agreed to it. And he came back for a sequel, so I don't know.
A sequel which... I remember the sequel. I remember feeling the sequel wasn't as strong, for sure.
The sequel. I watched the trailer for the sequel this morning after I watched the first one, just to sort of remind myself what the sequel even contained. Because what I was thinking of as the sequel, I think, is actually the third.
What, not involving Eddie Murphy's not in the third? I don't think.
Correct.
I think Eddie's
I
not
was
in,
remembering because that's the one headed by Raven Simone's character, right? I think
it's led by the daughter. I don't know if that's the name of the actress
Raven
or the
Simone,
character.
It's a different actress. Oh, it's not. It's the younger girl, but older.
Right.
Maybe. I'll look into that.
Carry
on.
I don't know enough.
So I think special effects wise, the movie it gets away with it when it really shouldn't. Like, it's kind of amazing actually that the movie functions the way it does. Because if it had gone full CG, which was a trend at the time, after Jurassic Park, a lot of movies tried to do full CGI creations, and those movies struggle now. When you look back at them, they feel they don't work as well. But this holds up surprisingly well as a result of that choice.
The conceit of the film, I think, is very clever as well, because my memory of the original Doctor Dolittle film and story, I mean, I could be wrong, is that there isn't this doesn't remember talking to animals, discovers it phase. That isn't a thing. They're just always talking to animals, is my memory of it. I could be wrong.
It's a completely different beast. It's insane how different the original book and movie are to this. If you want a closer interpretation that's modern, is sadly the Robert Downey Jr. one. The original Dr. Dolittle was a traveling man. He was an adventurer that went on these adventures and could talk to animals. So it was, a very different vibe. This is such an unusual take on the character. This stands out as being nothing like any. But I think previous. Go on.
How rare is it? I don't think that affects the film. I think it's actually very interesting. How rare is it that a film modernizes its original text it quite so effectively, because I think it makes for, the stuff about his confliction, the stuff about how actually treating the animals makes him feel like he felt when he first started treating people and gets him excited again. The fact of what it says for his relationship with his family and his daughter in particular, like it's all of that stuff, which is good, comes from the modernizing and the adaptation of the original text. And I think it was actually a really well, and as proven maybe by the reviews of the Robert Downey Jr. film, I've not seen it personally, but I think it's a really clever way of adapting it, and I think that its core conceit of doing that is a good one.
Well, there are always two approaches with something like that, isn't there? There's always going to be like, oh, we're going to completely like redo it. We're just going to take the vague idea and like do our own thing, tell our own story, which I always think like is maybe a stronger idea, not just because it gives you the chance to modernize it, but because it gives you the chance to like be a different thing. Like when you get too slavish to the original text, can be a problem, because also one, it's something people are already familiar with and already know, so you're already just telling a story to people again. But also like I do think it frees you up just to sort of give it a more, if you're not a slave to the original material, then you have the freedom to tell whatever story you think fits best in the circumstances you've created. Like you get that freedom, and I do think you're right that maybe indicative of that is the relative failure of the Robert Downey Jr. attempt to do the character. But that is the other angle. So you either go completely purist, and it's like this is just, we're using modern day special effects to tell that classic story of adventure, Dr. Dolittle, which they did. And to be fair, I don't think it was long enough ago that I actually think they had a chance to make that work. They just didn't.
Yeah, I agree. I
don't think that idea is dead on arrival. I just think that was a particularly bad example of it, which is a shame. There's genuinely a point in that movie where I think he removes some bagpipes from a dragon's butt.
Yeah, I'd like to say I've not seen it, and obviously as well, in terms of box office performance, it was affected by the pandemic and stuff. But I think there's a number of examples of doing it the first way, because obviously Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle does the same conceit, and that was hugely popular and well received, and big box office figures.
I think Welcome to the Jungle is kind of a hybrid a little bit, because it is actually a very different angle on it, because they go into the game like it's not them in the outside world having the game come to them. It's the opposite angle. So
but that feels like their equivalent of Dr. Dolittle relearning that he can talk to
right
animals.
Exactly. Okay, yeah. So I thought you were saying that they'd done the same thing and made it work. I misunderstood. Okay, I agree.
Yeah, it's a way of what you first described, modernizing it and having a new approach, but keeping the kind of the heart of it, or the core concept the same. It's similar. Yeah,
really quite smart. And you know what? And considering that this is kind of, it seems a little bit to me like this movie exists because, Eddie Murphy had just adapted another old sort of franchise in The Nutty Professor. The idea that they were just gonna they were do a string of these, let's take really old movies and just do modern versions with Eddie Murphy. It's really interesting that seemed to be the approach for a little while.
Were they that close together then? I didn't realise. 96. So yeah, literally that could have directly impacted the planning and the putting together of this.
Yeah, almost certainly. I don't know if it was necessarily inspired by, or if it was the same producers or what, but yeah, The Nutty Professor obviously was another film from the 60s. Obviously, I think that was a Jerry Lewis film, and I don't know who was in the original Dr. Dolittle. I don't even know.
I'm not sure.
Off the top of my head.
Well, it's funny looking at his filmography. Like you kind of think with Eddie Murphy, like there was this, the period that people, Meet Dave and Norbit and Haunted Mansion, and then you kind of think, oh, but then Shrek was a bit of a comeback. Actually, all the Shrek films were taking place at the same time as those periods. I mean, not quite. It was Shrek the Third around in between Norbit and Meet Dave, but yeah. I don't include Daddy Daycare in that. I think Daddy Daycare was a good film. But
I don't think I ever got as far as Daddy Daycare. I didn't mind. No, actually, it wasn't great. I think Tower Heist was a good performance from him, but a pretty bad movie.
Yeah, I liked Tower Heist. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Obviously,
I watched
Dolomite was his recent success, but prior to that, Norbit. Oh yeah, he did. He had a role in Dreamgirls. He was good in that.
He got the people. Well, a lot of the theory.
Oh God,
is
Haunted
that
Mansion. Yikes. Pluto
Well,
Nash.
a lot of people.
Oh.
A lot of people think the fact that Norbit was coming out stopped him getting an Oscar nomination for Dreamgirls. Basically, a lot of people feel that the Academy didn't want the the Norbit guy really nominated for Best Actor.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I tell you what, his last truly great performance was though. Before he sort of took his downturn and started putting out, Dr. Dolittle 2, Pluto Nash, Daddy Daycare, Bowfinger. He's incredible in Bowfinger. That's such an insanely good movie. Well, I don't remember the movie well enough to say it's a good movie still, that it holds up. But I can tell you right now with certainty, his performance in that movie, because he's played two characters and they're so different from each other, is incredible. I remember being so impressed with his performance in those movies. But anyway. Nice. We're off on an Eddie Murphy tangent.
One thing I found with this film, rewatching it, is in some ways, whilst it has, a beginning, a middle, and end, it is also in some ways a series of bits. Like it's not like comedy bits, but like, there's the intro bit, and then there's the montage where he's scared of the animals, and then there's the montage where he's saving a number of different animals, and it's so take for example, and actually sometimes even within the scenes, and the reason why this film, I think for me, ends up as like coming out as like it's fine, it's good, like it's fine, you're while away an hour and 20, why not, is because sometimes when they do an amazing joke or an amazing idea, it's immediately followed fairly quickly by one that doesn't quite work. So for me, I felt that right from the off. So there's a really silly joke where he, as a kid, is asking the dog why they always sniff each other's butts. And the dog says it's so you get a real idea of a person when you sniff their butt. And the voiceover says something like, him talking to animals was okay until it started to get problematic, and then he meets the head teacher at his new school and he sniffs their butt. Now, it's a silly joke, but it's a decent enough constructed joke. It's very slapstick, very, family friendly, but it's fine. That's immediately followed by a slightly bizarre Exorcist spoof where an exorcist comes over and tries to exorcise out of him his obsession with talking to animals, which didn't land for me. Maybe it would for some people. But I was like, there's going to be a lot of this, isn't there? There's going to be a lot of like, that's cool. And then, ooh. Would you agree with that before I then make the second point?
Yeah, I like jokes like that. This movie is like so much throwing shit at a wall, and some of it sticks. I thought that opening scene with the butt smelling is funny and charming. A little bit distracted by just Ellen DeGeneres being very clearly the voice of that dog, and it's just like she's almost too famous to get away with that, because you just like she's in the rest of the movie, right?
I thought that. I was like, not. Oh. I looked it up to check it was Eleanor DeGeneres, and it said her role is literally described as prologue dog, and I was like, oh, this dog is not appearing anywhere else in the movie.
Yeah,
okay,
correct. Yeah, which makes sense because dogs don't live that long. Like that dog wouldn't be alive in the present, so it makes sense. But there's a part of me that's just like, maybe that dog has a relative he comes up across and it's the same voice or something. I don't know. I wasn't sure, but it was kind of distracting. Forgetting that opening sequence is perfectly charming and also a little sad when his dad sends his dog away because he's worried about his son being, quote unquote weird or whatever. That is sad and really effective. And it is like much of this movie brought down by a really odd attempt at humor with the Exorcist thing. And that is a good analogy for the rest of the movie, where it's like a really good scene, or what would otherwise be a really good scene, brought down by, I think the scene where he dramatically brings in the rat to try and resuscitate the rat is another good example of that, where even though it's a rat and it's gross, and it's kind of gross out humor because he's giving a rat CPR, and it has that famous line, can you do CPR? CPR, I can't even spell it, and it's the moment his friends and family find out what he's been up to, essentially. But at the same time, he's like, no, I'm trying to save the rat's life, understand that. It's undercut slightly by essentially what is a very long fart joke. And I think that is that's the movie in a nutshell, isn't it? Like a reasonably well put together scene and a really shit joke bringing it down. So
yeah, I think so.
So yeah, I 100% agree, because I was that opening scene until the Exorcist thing. I was just like, this is really kind of, maybe I've been really wrong about this movie. Maybe this is gonna blow me away, and I'm gonna feel like a right idiot. But yeah, they managed to screw it up a little bit pretty quick, if I'm honest.
Yeah, the Exorcist thing, I've got it here, comes in at 1 minute 16 seconds.
Yeah, it didn't take long.
I'm glad that was the same experience. As each other on that. The other thing, for me, because they're so distracted by occasionally dipping into fart jokes and montages and bits, some of the ideas in the film, which are really good, are not given the time they should be. For me, the biggest example of this was his wife coming in at the end when he's working on the tiger and her comforting the tiger. And that's kind of her accepting that he is telling the truth and, her coming round and supporting him and being there for the tiger. And she says, what did he say and stuff. And it's a really nice moment. And admittedly, she did send him into an institute because she thought he was going crazy. But I was sat there going, that should be the daughter, because you spent more time with the daughter. And if the daughter came in, whilst you'd be a bit like, there's a child and a tiger, that's irresponsible parenting, although he does a lot of that throughout the film.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the idea of why it should be the wife is in there, but we probably needed a few more scenes. We needed more tension between him and his wife. We needed more to really earn that moment. Yeah. We just needed more time with those two characters,
or less resetting her every two scenes. You're right. You're absolutely right that she. So let me reposition myself. Sorry, I'm sort of sat weird. She, in several scenes, has to confront his odd choices. Right. The two biggest examples are when he runs away in the middle of the night at the cabin. Initially, in a really weird, panicked state. And in the moment, she's mad at him. But then she's just fine the next time we see her. So I was like, well, no, you escalate that. Don't de-escalate at any point. The other one is he goes to the institution. When he gets out, she's just happy to see him at home and not at all concerned. And she just says something like, how are you here? He's like, I got out. And she's like, great. And she just sort of accepts, like, oh, he's fine now. He's cured of mental illness in, a week? Paul Giamatti's a real good... a real good therapist. And that's the problem, is if you kept that tension up and you never reset her, then you earn it more. You wouldn't even need to necessarily add more scenes of him straining his relationship with his wife. There's plenty of those. This is the one where she's in the bedroom and he has to leave to go look at the paperwork, but it's actually because the house is full of animals. There are 3 or 4 really good, effective scenes at making the wife seem like, but because every time we see her following one of those scenes, she's happy, doting wife again, it keeps taking the effect out of it. And that's when we talk earlier in this podcast about how this movie is not perfect, that's a good example of one of the ways in which this movie is not perfect. Character consistency would be lovely.
Whereas again with the daughter, they do. So the tension with, for those that can't remember, the tension with the daughter is she's really into animals in the way that actually he was. And they do draw those parallels, but he's not got a lot of time for her love of animals, wants to get rid of the hamster, etc. And they do some wonderful parallels, and bring it back to his dad really subtly and really nicely. Like, that's done really well. But the thing is, with the daughter, it's constantly being escalated. It goes from, oh, you don't like my hamster, to you're trying to get rid of my hamster. That doesn't sound like a lot of escalation, but again, it's a family film. And they ramp it in the right way. And then when it's kind of concluded and he overhears her say that, she doesn't think he likes her and stuff, and he gives her a really sweet speech. The speech lands because it's been earned, because we've escalated that situation. Whereas, whilst I know what they were going for with the wife, it doesn't land because, as you say, it's a really nice way of putting it. They don't escalate it. But the daughter
or they
stuff,
keep escalating it and then de-escalating it, so it ends up neutral. I guess is probably maybe a more accurate way to actually describe what the script physically does. It's really strange. I've never known a movie to do that before, where like they're building to this this moment of understanding between the two characters when they've spent the movie kind of at odds, but because every time they came to odds, they then undid it somehow. Like sometimes they try to explain it. Like I think they try to explain the cabin one as he was sneaking off in the night to get them the dog, and that's the explanation.
Yeah, he does. Yeah,
but and it's kind of believable, but again, it's still like, what's the purpose of de-escalating it? Just so you can have more scenes of them together as a family and not deal with it? I don't know. It hurts the movie more than it helps it, I think. But you're spot on to realize that to have clocked that there is some sort of there's less value in that moment where she comes in and helps at the end than there should be, and I think that is kind of why. And I don't think a kid notices that. It's worth noting here. Like that's the sort of thing like an adult would watching the movie would notice. There's no way.
Oh yeah.
Either Child Dan or Child Chris, as much as even Child Dan was disappointed in this movie, was going, the real problem is that they they keep de-escalating the escalation, so it kind of undoes and damages the scene to the end of the movie. Like that would be some pretentious wanky shite coming out of I mean it's pretentious wanky shite as adults also, but it would have been even more pretentious wanky shite coming out of the mouths of 8-year-olds or whatever.
But to pay it a compliment, the father-daughter stuff and the father-son stuff is done, and the parallels between the relationships and kind of the Eddie Dr. Doolittle's dad not wanting his son to make the mistake that he made. That stuff's handled beautifully, I think.
Do you think? I was wondering about that, because I think the stuff between him and his daughter is handled beautifully, and I think how it parallels the prologue handled beautifully, because it's so clear he's making the same mistake his own dad made, right? So I think that's all perfect. But my one criticism of that is at the end of the movie, or towards the end of the movie, when suddenly his mostly silent dad, grandfather to the child, calls it out, I'm like, well, when did you learn your lesson about this? When did you regret your choice to not believe him? Like, he has this big moment where he comes out and says, you know what, he can talk to animals. I tried to beat it out of him as a kid and that was wrong. And it's like, well, that's true, but when did you learn that? Like, when did you change? What was did you think they earned that? Or do you think or do you think the explanation, and it's not in the text of the film, but do you think the explanation is just, he sees him doing it to his own daughter and realizes he did it to his son and regrets it? Or is it, he's known for years he made a mistake and only now is he doing anything about it? Like, I couldn't decide what they were going for.
What I think it needs, because you can fansplain it, but it's not in the text itself. What I think it needs is one scene. I think they do enough scenes of him looking at his son in almost disappointment when he runs off, the fact that he's late to the cabin, the fact that he's not listening to his kids. We see, especially at the cabin, we see him looking at his son in a shit kind of way. And, we have the moment where, that the conversation itself with his granddaughter does that. What we needed was a scene where because I think the scene where he's like, he can talk to animals, is before he publicly saves the tiger. I think what we needed is a scene of him seeing Dr. Dolittle, I think it's John, isn't it? Stop full naming. But seeing him with an animal, or save an animal, or do good for an animal, and go, oh shit, this version of my son is a better person. This is the person he should be. I made a mistake. We can assume that happened off screen, maybe, but I think the movie needed to. I think you're right. I think if we'd have had a scene where he sees him with an animal, that would have done that, and it would have been like, shit. Or maybe even you could do something really cool and hint that actually he's got it too a little bit, and he squashed it in himself, and that's why he squashed it in his son. Maybe, I don't know, but you know what I mean? Maybe that's a step too far. But I think a scene where he goes, because it's there at the end with the tiger, but the scene you're talking about with his wife, I think, has already happened then. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you do a moment between them earlier. Because you have the emotional weight moment when he looks at him after talking to his daughter, but you don't have the I like this person more moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I
think you had that.
exactly. I think you're. Yeah, any scene really to sort of complete that up, because it just feels out of nowhere. They tell you he feels that way, but they never show you the step between A and C. Like, we never get B. And a moment of realization, I think, would have made the moment where he talks to John's wife later in the movie, whose name I've forgotten. That would be more powerful. If he'd done that. So yeah, there's definitely a step missing in his character arc.
How do you think the film holds up as a?
Maybe we're asking too much of this family movie, though.
Yeah, that's the caveat for this entire conversation, without a doubt. Although in our defence, some family movies do all this stuff.
Yeah, I'll be interested if at some point we do get to when we get to Liar Liar, which is like definitely on my list. It'll be interesting to see if because I remember Liar Liar having a really good cohesive arc for the characters. You know, his relationship with his family. But I could be misremembering that.
Even like, whilst it's got other faults, arc-wise, it's there in the Santa Claus, which we haven't actually reviewed the Santa Claus, have we? No, never mind. Forget that. We've not actually reviewed that on here. It's because I watch it every year. I assume we have. It's kind of there in Jingle All the Way. There's kind of an arc, but again, not as strong.
What is it with like family movies from the 90s and like shit dads? Like, just the worst parents. Like, any 90s movie about a family, it opens and the dad's at work and he doesn't have time for his family. He's in an office, like Tim Allen in the Santa Claus. They do that with Arnold Schwarzenegger in Jingle All the Way.
Yeah, but this felt, in terms of that, at least at the beginning, they sort of ease off this, and it's better, like, halfway through to the end. But at the very beginning, I think it's worse than Jingle All the Way or the Santa Claus, because at least in those two films, whilst they're hardly there and they're late, when they are there, when they are literally in front of the child, they're trying and they're attentive. Eddie Murphy is just, Dr. Dolittle is just dismissing his kids all over the place at the beginning of this movie.
To be fair, though, it did lead to some of the funniest moments, though, in the film for me. Like, that first scene of him with his family, the thing where he talks about, well, we got you the guinea pig and then it went and died, and she's like, it's not dead, it's in my room. He's like, well, then why are you talking about this bloody egg? Like, it's such a funny scene and he delivers it so well. Like, I think Nadia came through the room at that point and heard that line, and I think she literally said, why isn't the whole movie about this grumpy guy? This is way funnier. And I was kind of a little bit like, actually, while he is terrible with his kids, like, he's a monster, I did find it kind of entertaining and charming in the way like House is entertaining and charming in the TV show. You know, like almost like an anti-hero.
That's Eddie Murphy, though, isn't it? Like, a lesser actor would not have been able to pull that off.
Sorry, I had to step away from my mic. I thought you were going to speak for longer.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well, I can do. So my other thing's a question though. I agree with you, and then I'll ask my question when you're back. I agree with that sentiment completely. I think it does, like, and her saying she wants to be called Paprika, because salt and pepper were big at the time. And for a little while, there's an ongoing joke in the film where he calls her different spices. I almost wanted them to do more of that. Like, he called her nutmeg at one point, and I almost wanted throughout the movie for him to call his other daughter various names. I wish they'd kept that going. My question, Dan, is well, actually, let's talk about the other daughter, and then I'll ask my question. Do you think the film needs a second child? Because they don't really do a lot with her, other than the aforementioned paprika joke.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? So it does. I mean, what year was this? This is after That's So Raven, right? This is post.
I don't know, because this is 98. When was That's So Raven? When was that on? Was that really the 90s? That's So Raven? No, 2003 to 2007 was That's So Raven.
So this is pre-Raven Simone being Raven Simone. The only actor, by the way, in this franchise other than Eddie Murphy, to not make it to the third one. Pretty much everyone else comes back for the third one, even though it was straight to video, except for Eddie Murphy and Raymond-Simone, for the obvious reasons of the two arguably biggest stars to come out of this. I mean, obviously Eddie Murphy famous already, but yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, with the older daughter? Because they end up doing something really clever in the second one, my memory is. Because my memory is that in the second one, the sort of surprising turn of events is that the disinterested, too cool for school daughter ends up being able to talk to animals. And that's actually really clever, because you would have expected the more emotionally attuned sort of like daughter, the one that was less distant in this one, would be the one that would pick up his mantle, and she eventually does in the third one. But discounting that for a minute, like the second one, so it almost feels like there's a part of me that sometimes thinks, did they just set her up to do the sequel? Because if they did, that's kind of genius, because she serves almost no purpose in this movie.
I suppose you're right. In the context, that does then make the second one more effective. Yeah.
So I'm sure they couldn't have been thinking about the second one while they were making the first one. It just doesn't seem likely, does it? But it does work really well. Like I don't 100% remember the second one. I watched the trailer for it, as I said before we did this, but they keep that plot element a secret. It's a bit of a twist.
I was quite surprised by that, because I, like you, watched the trailer for the second after watching this one, remembering that happened. Yes. And when I watched the trailer, I went, wow, that is showing some restraint in terms of the marketing. Like, fair play.
Yeah, I genuinely thought they were going to, like, include that. No, not include that. Like, I genuinely thought they were going to intentionally, like, stick that in there, because it is probably one of the most interesting things that happens in the movie. And again, it's the opposite daughter to the one you think. So even if, this movie in isolation, no, there's no need for the second daughter at all. She's just there to be the grumpy teenager. She serves no real purpose. She takes up space, screen time. From this movie's perspective, in isolation, not a useful character to have. Don't know why she's there. She doesn't really get any good lines. The paprika thing is kind of funny, I guess, but it just also doesn't go anywhere, except for that joke when he calls her another... What does he call her again?
Nutmeg.
Nutmeg.
Which, like I say, I wish they did. I don't know if you could. I don't know if you could hear me while you were getting a drink or whatever you were doing. But I wish they'd taken that further. I wished in every scene they interacted, he called her a different. Yeah, he called her Rosemary. He called her.
To clarify why I had to go away, there was a postman at the door, and he just kept buzzing the buzzer, and Nadia must have her headphones in again. So all I could imagine was the comments on this video going like, I could just keep hearing a buzzing on one of your mics, but it was the door. So I was like, if Chris is talking, I can just sneak, buzz the guy in, and come back and do nothing more, and I'll be gone in a few seconds. But then he I opened the door, he handed me the mail, and then he literally shuffled around in his bag for what felt like 70 minutes. But it probably wasn't. I was like, what, dude, you buzzed to come into this flight, you have the fucking parcel ready to hand me. Don't have it at the bottom of your bag.
Well, especially if you've been waiting that long.
What's that, sorry?
Especially if he'd been buzzing for
exactly. This is what annoys me. This is, pet peeve of mine. If you're in a big line at the supermarket, have your fucking debit card ready, because there's no excuse when you've been stood in line for that long to not then just be able to pay. Don't go faffing about in your bag for that should have been ready. We waited 10 minutes to be served.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what he was doing, but it was quite frustrating. I was just sad, come on, waiting for him to do it. I don't even know what this is. This delivery. It's the weirdest package I've ever seen. I don't know.
I think you're. Well, I mean, now we probably have to find out. So you have to. Well,
I'll take a picture of it. It's kind of triangular, but it's all bubbly at one end. I have no idea what this is. No, I'm sure I'll find out later. I'll take a picture of it before it's opened, and then I'll take a picture of it after to show you guys what it is. I'm sure it's something. It looks like it's come from Asia as well. Came through China Post.
But you don't know. You can't think of anything specific you've ordered.
No, but it says here toilet brush kit. Did Nadia order a toilet brush from China?
that is the best delivery for you to get, on a podcast if it is the case. I mean, just open it now. I think she won't mind you opening it, will she? Unless it's a toilet brush present for you.
I think they're doubtful. But I want to get a picture of it prior to it being open so you guys can see the weirdness.
Oh, okay, fine, fair enough.
I will confirm at a later date what this is. But now I can feel it. It almost certainly is because that fits the shape and the size. So yeah, there you go. It's a toilet brush for some reason.
I agree with you about the daughter. I think in the context of the sequel, it works well. In the context of this movie, you do sort of question it, but it does add more texture and more family dynamics, which helps when a lot of the film is about his pull away from his family. I think there's more weight to that, I suppose, when it's a bigger family.
And it's actually to give credit where credit is due. It's a pretty good performance from Raven-Symoné because so many of these movies have the grumpy teen, the sort of disconnected teen that just wants to put their headphones on and ignore their lame parents or whatever. And it's such a trope that it's really easy, I think, for actors to fall into stereotypes with that because it's been done so many times and come across as bratty or whiny. But she gives it just enough authenticity that it works for me. Like she's just clearly fed up. Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
She doesn't come across as bratty. She doesn't come across as whiny. She just comes across as tired of it, and that is very believable. So not surprising that one of the people who she came out of this movie and ended up getting her own TV show, or whatever. Becoming very famous in her own right. Like she's clearly talented. Like despite the fact they give her almost nothing to do in this movie, she is surprisingly convincing in a role that is very hard to do convincingly because it's been done so often. So yeah.
I completely agree. So my big question, Dan, is how do you think this film functions as the origin story for why Toby Ziegler and Oliver Babish ended up working at the West Wing?
It's a really good question. I thought about this while I was watching it, and I was thinking, how many doctors end up in politics? Probably a few, right?
Yeah.
It's weird they're not going by their original names, and it feels like the antagonism they develop for each other in this movie doesn't carry through into the West Wing, which is a failing of this movie, in my opinion.
I mean, it does. Like it does in series 7, when he's questioning him.
Oh shit! Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You see, this is the problem: is we're talking about late West Wing. My memory of that is much vaguer.
My
adult rewatching of West Wing tends to stop at season 4. For those who don't know what we're talking about, 2 of the actors in this movie that play the 2 doctors he works with, both ended up working together on the West Wing.
And let me tell you, if you've just watched The West Wing, it's distracting. I'm aware it's my problem, not the movie's problem.
Sure.
But just because it's both of them, you're just like,
it's very specific. Yeah. So it's Oliver Platt and Richard Schiff. Richard Schiff, who also would be very recognizable to people who are watching TV right now, is obviously as his character from The Good Doctor. Yes, thank you. Richard Schiff is an actual national treasure that just no one seems to realize is a national treasure. Like, Richard Schiff is just such a brilliant actor, and he's been in so many things through so many eras, and you just think, like, how is that man like a household name?
That's the thing. All joking aside, both of them do a brilliant job in this movie.
They do.
Richard Schiff in particular.
Cast in this movie, we should talk about that in general. Excellent. Animal voices as well, particularly, and I'm mixed on Norm Macdonald. I've seen Norm Macdonald in things I've liked him in. I've seen Norm Macdonald absolutely chew the scenery and stuff. I have a very mixed relationship with the performances of Norm Macdonald. He's amazing as Lucky. That voice is perfect for that dog. Albert Brooks doing the tiger. So much heart. You really believe he's in pain. Like, how charming is he as that character? Chris Rock doing what he needs to do here, which is be kind of annoying as Rodney. But yeah, what a cast. Ellen DeGeneres, obviously, we already talked about. But the pigeons. One of them is Julie Carver, or Kavner, I never pronounce it right, who is Marge Simpson in The Simpsons. And she's teamed up with the male pigeon, which is Gary Shandling. John Leguizamo is one of the rats. I mean, this cast is mental. And they're all really good. Like it can't be easy to be like, you're in a booth, pretend you're a dog. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, the only, like I said earlier, the only thing I felt was that there were points where it didn't feel like Chris Rock was talking to Eddie Murphy. It felt like Chris Rock was doing one thing at one pitch and Eddie Murphy was doing another thing at another pitch, and it didn't quite feel like an interaction between two people.
For sure. Yeah,
Or
and
indeed
it
one
made me
person, a
wonder.
hamster.
It made me wonder if like some of the other actors were on set. So I wondered if, for example, Albert Brooks was on set delivering the Tiger's lines to Eddie Murphy in the voice with the performance, because that performance, those two, that felt more real, that interaction, than Rodney and Eddie, which makes me think that maybe they didn't have necessarily a voice actor cast for Rodney early on.
Maybe.
They settled on that voice later or something. I don't know.
And don't get me wrong, what Chris Rock is doing is very good. It's still it's funny. It's again, this isn't something you would ever notice as a kid, but it did jar with me. But it's still a very good performance. Just nipping back to Richard Schiff. What's amazing is his character, with hardly any screen time, has to kind of have a bit of a reversal, or at least
he has an arc. He has a weird little arc. He
has an arc,
but without
and he
any
doesn't have any.
Without any scenes that actually develop it, he just does it with his performance throughout.
Yeah,
it's great.
And not even the scenes that he does have. It's not like it's particularly in the text, but literally, it feels like the performance achieves it. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah, that shouldn't have worked at all. Like, his turn at the end. So for those who don't remember, one of the subplots is that Eddie Murphy is a successful doctor, and he's about to seal this deal with a big conglomerate that will mean he's going to sort of become a bit more corporate. He's going to have less time with actual patients. They're going to have to drop some of the staff at their clinic, but it's going to give them a shit ton of money. And of his two colleagues, one of them is all money, money, money. You know, there's one of my favorite lines in the movie, to be fair, is when he says, "Just be normal for a couple of days till this gets signed, and I'll buy you a fucking rat farm."
Yeah.
It's
a very
such
good performance.
a
Even
weird
that,
line, but it's so well delivered.
It is written as a really bad caricature of "I want my money," da 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 da. But again, I can't remember the name of the actor. Sorry, you did say Oliver Platt.
Yes.
Does a fantastic job with it. Like, he makes that work. And again, there's a lot in this film that in the hands of lesser actors wouldn't work.
Correct. Yeah, I think Oliver Platt does do a great job. He's got a really good sense of, like, you don't agree with the character's desire for just profit over everything, but he sells it in a way where you believe it from him. You don't necessarily, you don't need it. You just sort of, you just buy it because he's doing such a good job. And it's the same with Schiff, where his character takes a turn towards the end of the movie where he's on side with Eddie Murphy's character. And of course, that is the whole conceit of this movie is, he's got this big deal happening this week, and of all the weeks for him to start acting like a complete nutcase, this is the week, so it's just hide him until the deal is signed. Oh, we're gonna get that big deal signed. So yeah, I don't know, it's a bit cheesy, I suppose, that element of it. But again, good performances all around sell it.
But again, it is the only thing that adds any kind of plot and jeopardy to the film, because otherwise it's just a series of, do you know what I mean? Like, At the end, I was like, towards the end, I was thinking, where's this going? And then when they pull up and try and save the tiger, I'm like, oh no, it is just here. Yeah, no, there's no bigger twist. There's no, because I couldn't really remember it, and I was like, is there something like where the doctor's surgery is doing something wrong, or the animals? Like, I think the actual plot of Dr. Dolittle 2 is better and more epic on scale. This is actually a very ironically human story. It comes down
it is, isn't it? Because if memory serves, the second one is like he's trying to save a whole woods from being destroyed. All the animals come to him and they're destroying our homes. So he's trying to stop a logging company from destroying the natural habitat of a huge number of animals. That's pretty big scale. This is very much a guy who seems a bit odd to his family, and he's potentially, if his oddness creeps up, he's going to lose this deal that's going to earn him a lot of money. But also, the stakes are very personal in that actually he'd be happier. There's a really good scene halfway through the movie, where he talks about to Oliver Platt's character, who's the character's name I can't remember, where he says, like, do you remember when we first got into being doctors and we had a small clinic and it was a tiny room and it was like we had no money, and the guy's like, I blocked it out. Like that's that character's there. I blocked out being poor. I like being rich. That's his whole the entire character in one sentence. But anyway, he's like, I just remember every day we dealt with these patients, we made their lives better, and I felt good. I felt like I was making a difference. So I guess that scene really informs everything else, because you sort of go like, well, actually, the reason he's enjoying this stuff with the animals so much, and why at that point he's helping them, is because he's getting that same feeling again, you know, that he got back in the day helping those people, helping these animals. So I guess you're right. Like the stakes are huge. They feel huge. They're not though. They're very personal. It's about a guy who wants to feel like he's helping individuals. And over taking all this money, and then you know, this thing happens to him that allows him to do that, and he latches onto that feeling again. It's reasonably well constructed. Otherwise, if you didn't have that scene, I think you'd almost find it hard to believe that he ever bothers to help these animals. Like, you know,
yeah, that's true.
And then, of course, we haven't really talked about it yet. There's the sequence in which he then gets committed, because he claims he can talk to the animals. And one of the most, I think, criminally underappreciated, because, okay, just to clarify here, Paul Giamatti is in this movie. He's in several scenes. He has several lines of dialogue. He is uncredited.
Is he?
Uncredited.
Why?
No idea. I tried Googling it. I tried finding out. It's not in the trivia. It's not online. I couldn't figure it out. There were listings going. There was like, I found like an article on like a BuzzFeed type site that was like, you know, 10 of the most crazy times a big actor was uncredited or whatever, and this was one of them. No idea. If he didn't say any lines, or he just said one line, I'd go maybe. He's in multiple scenes. He has multiple exchanges with the lead character. He's almost an antagonist. I don't understand why Paul Giamatti isn't credited for his work on this movie. Bad agent? I don't know.
That's crazy.
It's crazy the unions let that happen. I don't know what loophole they used to make that work, but they did not credit Paul Giamatti.
That's nuts.
And I saw that.
He's brilliant.
Because I saw it on IMDb as Paul Giamatti as, I think his character's called Blaine, and then it was in brackets, uncredited. And I went, yeah, right. So I pulled up the movie and went through the credits, because I was like, he's in there. There's no way. He's not in there. It's actually insane. I don't know. I don't shrug. I have no idea.
That is mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, me too.
The whole committed sequence isn't brilliant. That's probably the bit that I was less, because it just feels a bit redundant. Like it doesn't. He changes his mind really quickly after. It's just not that. It's not that amusing.
They're trying to go for that sort of like second act lowest point thing, you know, where he sort of like, you know, he's sort of at peace with the animal world. He knows what it is he wants out of things, and they have to give some turmoil before he makes the right choice again, you know. So like, they have him committed, and they're like, they have the character decide, this is ruining my life, I'm no longer playing along, and he starts ignoring the animals. And the way you set him on that path to doing that is by showing how very overtly it's ruined his life. How's it ruined his life? Well, it's got him put in an institution, and his wife's upset with him, and it's potentially going to ruin this deal that's going to get him all this money. So then he tricks his way out of the thing and starts denying his ability to hear the animals talking, and then everything just sort of goes back to being normal until he makes the right call later on. So it's kind of like, it's that end of the second act, start of the third act low point that most movies have, but it does feel forced here, and it's done really quickly, so it doesn't quite function. I know what they were going for, but it doesn't work. You don't believe it. Completely. They almost do too much of a good job. Actually, to be honest with you, that scene I talked about where he talks about why he gets so much joy out of helping the animals, that almost is so good that then that affects this being effective. You can't then believe him turning his back on them and going back to his old ways, because you've been so well convinced of the opposite, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So yeah.
The scene that made me laugh watching it is they do this when he's first discovering that he's got these powers back. Because for those that don't remember, he swerves to avoid hitting a dog and then hits his head, and then it's almost as if that sort of triggers it. Which in itself is quite clever, because I like to kind of think it could be his compassion for the dog that's brought it back, and then the hit on the head has helped. Or if you kind of don't want to buy that, it's a hit on the head and that's done it. But I also love that they didn't then, like, I think is it What Women Want, where he tries to recreate the accident and goes on about getting hit on his head and makes references to it, whereas this, it's kind of, that's not the story, so we don't waste time with it, which is quite a good decision. But what makes me laugh is, the next day, he's having dinner outside, and he's distracted by the pigeons, and then he goes to go home, and he's distracted by the horse, even though that's actually the policeman, and then there's another animal on the way, and basically, it's this whole big montage where he can't avoid animals, and it's driving him crazy. And what I love about that is, presumably, he managed to get up, get dressed, travel down, go and sit down, start the meeting without any animal interruption. And it's like, wow, you're trying to do this. This power means there's animals everywhere. And yet it's only come into effect now. Just make me laugh.
Yeah, no, it's like, it's an old trope, isn't it? You're right. If you actually fill in the gaps, you're like, how did he even get there and like not meet any animals? If he's so unlucky to come into contact with so many animals across the rest of the day, it seems strange he got to that meeting in the first place without coming into contact with any other animal. But yeah, it's, I don't know, you can't quite, like, if you wanted to question the element, you could all day. Like, there are points, like, his powers don't even actually make sense, because there are times when they imply that he's meowing at cats and barking at dogs. So does that mean he's roaring at the tiger when he's talking to the tiger? And if so, how do other people in the final scene understand what he's saying to the tiger? Because I'm sure there's points when he says things to the tiger and other people hear it. I don't know. Why would you include that joke, an idea? Like, just make it so he's talking to them and you don't have to understand how and why that works. Like, putting a physical element to it and saying he's meowing or barking. At one point she says, "I thought I heard you barking." Like, why would you? Yeah, why that raises more questions than it answers, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so, completely. There is a lot of but I don't, in a way, that's not even a criticism, because it's a family film and all family films are full of that. So, like, I know I brought it up, but like, we're not actually critiquing the film on that. It's just an amusing observation.
Yeah, the movie requires a certain amount of suspension of disbelief, and if you're not willing to do that, then you're not going to enjoy it anyway. That is just how it is.
Completely. What were your kind of other general thoughts?
That is a good question, Chris. I have the IMDb up, so I don't have them in front of me, but let's have a quick look. We've said that. You know what? We've actually covered a lot of this stuff.
Cool.
In
that case, give me the triv then.
Oh, one thing I do make a note of that we've not covered, and this actually fits nicely into our nitpicking, but it's a kids' film, family film, so it doesn't really matter section. The glasses. This bothered me. The glasses for the horse.
Oh, the glasses on the horse?
Yeah. It's now.
Yeah, I know, Jess said that.
Now, I understand it's one of the few elements actually from an old Dr. Dolittle novel. So I understand that it's a little reference to the classic story, but it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. You would need to know exactly to what degree the horse's eyes were out of alignment. You would craft special glass to do that. You couldn't just get two standard magnifying glasses and put them over the horse's head and it work. And I'll be honest with you, Chris, while I acknowledge it's nitpicking and all the things we just said are true, that fucking took me out of the movie so much. I was so angry. I was like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, Jess did that.
She was just like, what? No one would notice.
No one would notice that the horse suddenly has glasses and just take them off him.
Yeah. The horse gets back to the police station, and they're like, "Geez, the horse escaped." And they're like, "Oh," and it's come back with this weird contraption. It said, take that off. What's it? Get off. Throw them in the bin. Well, that's weird. Someone's pranked us. That's my other question as well. We're playing the nitpicking game. All the animals that come to visit him, they all just escaping from their owners. Like there's lots of farm animals. Where is there a farm near him? He seems to live in a city, right? So like there's sheep and there's goats and like ducks. And I'm just like, did the sheep escape off a local farm? Like where is he near a farm?
Did you find kind of, again, sort of nitpicky, but just, and again, I think this is something all kids' films do. But did you think sometimes there was this weird... It felt like the executives went, okay, great, guys, really good family-friendly film, great. Listen, we need you to slip in 3 jokes for the adults. What? Won't that clash? No. Just maybe some casual references to illegal drugs or a dog saying that a woman has a massive arse, something like that. Because literally, a woman bends over and a dog says, "Is that the biggest arse you've ever seen?" And when Eddie Murphy's going nuts, he says something like, "They told me that it wouldn't affect me in college, that I'd be fine, and here I am years later," which I read as a joke to him doing drugs in college and him thinking that's what's affected him. Obviously, I didn't particularly pick up that one, especially as a kid, but it just felt like there was a little sense of, let's chuck in some stuff for the parents as well.
Yeah, but if you I'm sorry, but who's laughing at that? Okay, yes, it's not particularly the most appropriate thing for a kid's movie to be talking about how giant that woman's ass is. But that's also a style of humour that is only funny to children. I can't think of an adult I know laughing at that joke. The dog thinks she has a big ass. Okay.
To be fair, the children probably... Unlike the drug one, the children probably would have laughed at that, unfortunately. Not saying that's right, but yeah, you're right, children would laugh. But to be honest with you, that's set before a scene where the entire scene is about the dog swallowing a thermometer up his ass. So that entire sequence is very... literally bum humour.
Oh, I've lost Chris. I've lost Chris. So for some
still
reason. There? Did he hang up on me? Did I hang up on him? We'll find out.
Dan. Did bum humour make you hang up?
Signal, I think. Tragedy. Oh.
Don't know what happened then.
Are you hanging up on me, Chris? What's going on?
No, from my point of view, it looked like you hung up on me. The point I just made was, so that entire scene, I don't know how much you heard, but basically that's before a scene where the entire purpose of the scene is a dog's arse eats a thermometer. So it's a lot of bum humour going on there.
Yeah, I mean it's a movie full of like quite lowbrow humour, and then I think if somebody was to say like, what's the, like, if we're not just like doing character arcs and narrative structure and all that stuff, what's the biggest problem in this movie? It's the jokes. They are hit and miss, to say the least. They are like, it's a real roller coaster of like, here's an actually clever joke. Like as you point out, that drug one, I think genuinely funny because it's implied, it's not too overt. But it's a funny notion that, like, a man suddenly talking to animals says, is it that time that I did that thing in college? Oh, they told me it wouldn't affect me, but here I am as an adult, and it's like, that's funny. I get it. Like, it's subtle, it's amusing. It does kind of hit for adults, and it's just Eddie Murphy being a bit manic for kids. Like, I'm on board with stuff like that. But yeah, there is a joke ostensibly about the thermometer getting lost up the dog's ass. There's a lot of fart jokes. There's a lot of like that dog saying, is this woman's ass big or what? Or the dog getting... Oh, actually, tell you, here's an example of one that works, that's kind of in the same region but actually functions. It's the dog being taken to get spayed. And he's like, don't fix me. I'll be good. I won't look at another woman again. And then a dog goes past him like the female dog, and he's like, hey, baby. And he's like, that's funny. But that's immediately... That is bookended by is this woman's ass big or what joke and the thermometer disappearing joke. So it's like it's flip a coin every time they make a joke in this movie whether you'll actually find it funny or not. I think that's definitely. And what, who's to say, right? Humor, it's subjective. Maybe somebody watched the movie and found the opposite 50% of the jokes funny, or maybe found all of it funny. I don't know. For me, I think actually you would ignore most of the stuff we found to talk about as criticisms for the movie to keep, to fill a podcast where we've analysed a movie. nitpicky nonsense or just like small stuff that you probably won't notice or you'll just like go with because it's a family film, right? Even when we talk about like the character stuff that doesn't work, it's a bit wonky. The structure stuff that doesn't work, it's a bit wonky. Like that section in the middle at the institute, you'll overlook almost all of that when you're watching it, which is why you'll come out with our initial, sort of overview, which is it's fine, works. There's nothing really, strictly speaking, too wrong with it, because even the stuff that isn't a deal breaker in any way, shape, or form. But I would say the closest thing to a criticism I think that would affect the average modern viewer from enjoying this is the jokes, because they are very hit and miss, which is a shame. You would hope that would hold up, but it's probably, let's be honest, the reason young Dan wasn't thrilled with this film either, because ultimately there's a style of humor Eddie Murphy's very good at doing and was very successful in with all of the previous movies, your Golden Childs, your Trading Places, your Beverly Hills Cops, your 48 Hours, all that stuff, all that good stuff. And it's just not present here because it's just aiming down in a weird way. So yeah, I think that is the closest thing to a legit criticism I have, because otherwise it's just nitpicking, like, why is that woman eating shellfish on a toilet? Like, what, her friends would snatch it out of her hands? Like, the doctor doesn't want her to eat shellfish, but why is she snuck into the toilet to eat the shellfish?
But again though, it's a massive contradictions, because I completely agree with that criticism. On the other hand, I think it's quite a clever choice to keep bringing that woman back and making it, the conceit there is a good one. Like, okay, well, let's have a running gag involving one of the human patients. Like, that makes sense as an idea. It's just that running gag isn't very funny. But do you know what I mean? So it's like the idea is strong. Execution, not so much. And yeah, before Triv, we have been nitpicking, and as often is the case, I think especially more with this one, the reason, because we have talked about the things that are really good about it. The father-daughter storyline is done really well. The parallels are really well. The special effects are really good. When some of the jokes are good, they are good. I don't think anything is incredible, which is why we've not talked for 20 minutes about this specific element of the film, complimenting it. But it definitely has, as we've discussed throughout, some strengths. I think the core conceit of the idea is very good. I think they've modernized it very well. I think it's an interesting take on the character, as we've said, when the jokes land, they land well.
Yep. The cast are great.
The cast are phenomenal. The special effects hold up. Like, if I saw these special effects on TV now, I'd be like, hey, they've done a good job with the special effects, haven't they? So yeah, I think there's a lot to enjoy. It's a good, harmless family film.
Yeah. I think that, again, dodgy compositing, but yeah, on the whole, the special effects, they definitely, for a film this old, they shouldn't work anywhere near as well as they do. There are plenty of films from this era and later that don't hold up now, where this one does. I don't know if they are comparable to modern day special effects, but they definitely function, and they've basically given the film the grace. It's aged gracefully, basically, is the way I'm describing it, I think, maybe. So you can tell it's older special effects, but they work well enough not to take you out of the film. I think that's where I land on the special effects. Yeah. So let's tackle some trips. So we've already mentioned, obviously, that Eddie Murphy was terrified of live animals and insisted.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. He insisted as many as possible be superimposed digitally into the scenes, but in places there were a few scenes where he couldn't avoid acting in the same room as the animal, and in those scenes they frequently ended with Murphy screaming, not finishing his lines, etc., etc. I just love that. That's like one of the best pieces of trivia we've ever had. It just is. At one point, John is watching the original Dr. Dolittle from 1967 on the TV. Got a question.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, I got a question for the world then. When the guy whose name is Dr. Dolittle starts saying he can talk to animals in a world where the movie Dr. Dolittle exists.
That's so weird. I mean, it's a nice nod, but maybe put a picture of the actor or something in the background. Don't have him literally watching the film.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's madness.
Yeah. As we've already sort of talked about, but the Triv mentions here, very few elements of the original Doctor Dolittle films and books were used. The few exceptions are his stay in a mental hospital, which my understanding is that's part of the character's sort of journey in the books. I don't know if they tackled it in the original film though. And also the horse getting the glasses made of magnifying glasses, that's also from the original text. So obviously a lot of animals, real life animals used, and I think that is why these special effects work. It's tangible things on set, huge amount of actually trained animals with adjustments made to them rather than fully special effect created creatures. So there are quite a large number of them in the film, and a lot of them needed months and months of planning and training and work before they could be in scenes. There were also, in certain scenes, multiple animals used to play one animal, but each one was trained to do the one specific thing. So, like, if they needed a pigeon to turn around at a certain point, but that pigeon was later in the movie pecking at something, they would train one pigeon to do the turn move and one pigeon to do the pecking move, and then they would just in the movie they would claim they were the same pigeon. Does that make sense? So that's how they would do that. So it's pretty interesting to read into. They had like animal trainers and behavioral experts on set at all times. They also like had to be very careful because they had such large numbers of animals on set, so they were worried they wouldn't interact well, or each other's presence would stop them. If they're trained in isolation, when you bring them together on a set, what happens? So they had to start bringing the animals together while training them to do these things so that they wouldn't affect each other. So at one point there were like as many as 45 trainers present for a single scene to provide of all the care and focus that was needed for all the different animals, and also to keep them calm. They also had to keep an awareness of natural predator-prey situations as well, because there are scenes where owls appear in the same area as natural prey, such as like rabbits or rats. So for example, the owl was always filmed separately for safety, to make sure that none of the animals were eaten. Because
I hadn't thought about how much of a nightmare that must have been.
Yeah, they always say, don't they? You don't want to work with kids or animals, and this movie's got a little of both. So, a lot of one. There are a lot of animals in this movie, which if it didn't have, we'd have been here complaining about it not having. So that's correct.
Yeah, there's definitely, for a film about a man talking to animals, he definitely does enough talking to animals.
Yeah. One of the newest technological innovations in this movie was actually 2D imaging, and was used to create the illusion that the animals were actually talking. So the animals were filmed separately, moving their mouths naturally, and then in post-production, the movements were manipulated frame by frame to make it seem as the animal is framing the words with its own teeth, lips, and tongue. This differs from the imaging and special effects used in the movie Babe from a few years earlier, where the animal mouths were 3D images. Babe, they used computer-generated mouths that were superimposed on top of the animals, and while that technology was advanced for its day, the 2D imaging, which is using the real images of the mouth moving and the real natural movements of the mouth, but just adjusting the timings and the frames to make them sync up with the voice actor, actually ends up being more realistic in the end. It'll be interesting because at some point I do think we'll probably cover Babe on this, and I'm going to be interested to keep an eye out for the differences between the two. Because, that's quite interesting to me. Maybe I'm sad.
No, not at all. No, I think that is interesting.
So many of the scenes were called for animal doubles. So when Rodney rides on top of the moving vehicle with his cage, is tied to it, or has a mishap in the ladies' room, an animatronic guinea pig was used. They also, I noticed, it's not in here, but I did also notice they used an animatronic Lucky when he gets his head caught in the window for a couple of shots. And he like stands on the automatic window and it closes on his head. That's clearly an animatronic. Like I spotted that pretty quickly. It's very good, and I think most people watching it wouldn't notice, but it stuck out a little bit to me. What else we got here? So yeah, most animals actually had both the animal and an animatronic version of that animal, a double, to do certain scenes. They also had many doubles of the actual physical animals themselves. So they'd have like two pigeons that looked identical, so that if one got tired and couldn't keep filming the scene, but they wanted to keep filming, they would swap them out, just to keep it present. Interestingly, the actor dog called Sammy, who played Lucky, wasn't always... this is how it's phrased in the trivia. Wasn't always living in the lap of stardom. Sammy was actually discovered by a trainer for the Birds and Animals Unlimited company at a shelter in LA, and he was actually already 5 or 6 years old at the time, and a mixed breed animal, which made him potentially very challenging to train. But it turned out he was exceptionally intelligent and was able to learn behaviors in a very short amount of time, and lots of them too that he could remember and do. Stacy Basil, one of his handlers, was like, very few dogs are capable of learning these things. They really lucked out there. I also think it was really cool, and this is just a note, they did a really good job making him look like a street dog in the first part of the movie, and then once he's taken in by the family, I don't know if you noticed, his fur got less ragged.
Yeah, it was very nice.
He looked cleaner, he looked happier, he looked healthier. I thought that was neat.
The dog in general, though, I think they did make the right call, but there were points where, with later on his relationship with the dog, where I was like, there's a version of this story you could do where it's just the hamster. Do you know what I mean? You don't necessarily need... It felt like they were trying to give him two buddy pets, and the dog takes over from Rocky, in which case, why do the Rocky of it all? Do you know what I mean by that? Or maybe that's just because it's Chris Rock, so you feel like Chris Rock should be in the whole thing and be his sidekick. I don't know.
Yeah, because I think like it's written for him to be buddied up with Lucky, and I think because the guinea pig can't travel, like there are multiple points the dog comes to see him.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I think it was always planned for the guinea pig to sort of fill the role of like comic relief rather than plot necessity.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because he's also one of the first animals that talks to him, but he's not the first.
He is the first.
That is Lucky. But when his scene where he sort of starts talking is played for comedy, not for drama. He doesn't really have much of a relationship with Eddie Murphy beyond that first journey they have together, which is still more about Eddie Murphy, John dealing with the realization he can talk to animals out of nowhere and might be going insane.
That's all a valid argument, Dan.
Final piece of trivia, Chris, and we all know what it's time for. Our world-famous segment, Chris. Cars exist.
Yes, they do.
John's car...
Tell me about them.
Is a 1996 Nissan Pathfinder R50.
Woo!
Boom!
What a rush.
I know. That felt good. After 3 Star Wars movies where we just didn't have any cars, because why would we have cars? I was itching for a Cars Exist, Chris. And there it is.
So, mate, I haven't felt exhilaration like that since Superman arrived in the Snyder Cut.
Really?
Hey, Superman, mate, whatever you think of the Snyder Cut, Superman arriving, it's a good entrance. I like that.
I like that movie less and less the more I think about
it. Well, let's not talk about the Snyder Cut. If you want to hear us talk about the Snyder Cut, it is in the Nothing But Static episode, Jack Schneider's Justice League. Still makes me laugh.
It's Jack Snyder's Nothing But Static.
Sorry, yeah, Jack Snyder's Nothing But Static, and it's on YouTube as well.
Yeah, I took that segment up and put it as a separate piece on the YouTube channel.
That is Dr. Dolittle. Although I think you'll agree, we did a lot. Is there a listener's question, Dan?
I want to dive into that more. What happened there, Chris?
It's a good joke, Dan. What that was, Dan, is some well-constructed comedy. Because it was a play on the film title.
Do you want to get in touch with the writers of this movie and maybe punch up some of their fucking jokes?
Retroactively.
Yeah, we'll get you on like one of them special time travel phones. You can talk to the past. We'll let you... Guys, I'm here to warn you. I'm from the future. The thermometer in the butt joke doesn't work.
Dan, if I've learned anything from Apple TV calls, it's that time travel phones are not always the best thing in the world. Right.
A little plug for an episode of Nothing But Static, which will be out when this goes. So check out Nothing But Static episode. I don't know, 120, 130. The
one after Jack Snyder's Justice Nothing But Static.
Yeah, it'll be episode 220 of Nothing But Static. It's due out on the 4th of April, where we're going to review Calls, an Apple TV show. I don't have a listener question. I'll be honest with you. We're dry. We're out, and we're in this weird period because I'll tell you what happened. We're in this weird period where they were the ones I solicited from patrons early on, but then we were waiting for the podcasts to go out where we say we're doing questions now. Give us them.
Okay, well, in that case, Dan, I will ask you a question.
Well, just to cover my explanation, that just happened 2 days ago. So the very first podcast we did a listener question and actually asked for them just went out. So I'm now expecting more to come in. We've been in a weird gap period. So apologies for listeners for not having one. But I guess 2 weeks on the trot. Although last week I just hadn't checked.
Also last week's podcast was like 4 days long, so I wouldn't worry about it.
I was very relieved. In that case, we jumped straight into the movie this week.
I would ask a listener's question, Dan.
Sure.
You've got a cat. If you could spend 5 minutes Dr. Dolittling and talking to your cat, what would you ask him?
I would ask him why. I would ask him why in the evening he wants me to feed him 2 hours earlier than he's fed every night. Like, why meow at 6 when you know you're fed at 8? Like, I feed you at 8 every night. You always meow for food at 6. Or
do you ever feed him at 6 to see what would happen?
Yeah, and he then meows at 8. Like, I can't win. He'll meow at 8 as well if I do it that way around. Like, I don't understand. And also, sometimes he's very sneaky. He'll eat because I'll feed him, and then I'll go to the office or the bedroom, whatever, and then he'll wait for Nadia to go in the kitchen, and then he'll meow at her like I've not been fed yet. Like, he'll eat his food real quick and then meow at her, and he's once or twice he's succeeded and tricked her, and she's gone, oh, he's not been fed, and then fed him. But we're wise to it now, so she asks me. But yeah, he's a sneaky little git. But also, he'll meow and meow and meow to go out, and I'll open the window, and then he'll stare out. And then just turn around and walk further into the house and go lie down or something. Like
I've been there when he's done that.
So my question would be just, why do you do that? Like, what do you want in those moments? Because I don't understand. Because there are times, Chris, when the window is open, his bowl is full of food, he's got plenty of water, his toys are on the floor ready for him to play with. He's got the world is his oyster, Chris. There's literally nothing he could want, and he will sit there and meow at me.
I don't have, because obviously we should both answer the question, I don't have a cat, so if I had 5 minutes asking your cat a question, I'd probably just ask what your cock and balls are like. Do you know what I mean? We don't have that relationship. I've never seen you naked. I'll probably say, whoa, what's Dan like naked?
Yeah, I guess, he must have seen me naked at some point, I suppose.
Yeah, I wouldn't ask him that, obviously. But I probably would ask, maybe I'd ask something about you. I'd be like, does Dan ever finish a podcast and be like, oh, fucking Chris, Jesus.
And he's like, every time, mate, every time. The question you should ask is, has he ever not done that?
Walt's like, but I've got a pretty good line into the teddy bear network, and according to your teddy bears, much the same situation in your house. So...
Yeah, there you go. So our not listener question from Chris. I appreciate that. So yeah,
but the main question, Dan, go on. Sorry, go on. The question that matters, where are we going next week?
Well, I was just going to spin off from our listener question chat to, if you'd like to leave us a question, and not leave an awkward moment in the next episode where Chris says to me, have we got a listener question, Dan? And I go, no. Which just is the saddest thing. You can be a patron. Patrons can ask questions that we answer. We give you a little shout out at the end of the episode. For as little as $1 a month, you've got the ability to hear the next episode a week early and ask us a question. It can be anything. We've answered questions on our favourite cereal, or which cereal reality would we live in. We answered a question on, like, what if we could erase a piece of media from our brains and reconsume it? What would that be? So we've done we've covered a gamut of questions. They've all been very, very good. So if you feel like adding to that, head over to the Patreon. You can ask on there, or you can ask on our Discord in the special section that only patrons can see, called the Yellow Lounge. Now, if you are on our Discord and you didn't realize that existed, join the Patreon. Find out all the saucy stuff we chat about in there. Chat in the Yellow Lounge is always pretty straightforward, actually. I mostly use it to like give them heads up information about what we're going to cover. I suppose I never promoted that. The people in the Discord in the Yellow Lounge who are patrons, the reason it's called the Yellow Lounge, by the way, is because if you're a patron, your name is yellow in the Discord. I was updating them as we were going as to what we were covering on this podcast. So they knew months ago that we were doing, Joe's Apartment, Final Destination, Truman Show, in that exact order.
They got to start getting excited early for us to talk about such classics.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of people were like, oh, wow, I was just thinking about Final Destination, or I love Truman Show. So people do, I guess, some people do care, like, what we're covering. But that information, the patrons get earlier through the Discord. So another benefit to being a patron, I suppose. That and I'll love you forever. So while we're on the subject of next week, and the episode that if you're a patron, you can... No, sorry. If you become a patron, if you're currently listening to this on YouTube or Spotify, you can hear this episode right now. Chris, we're doing it. It's finally time. It is finally time to do a sequel. We've been teasing it. We've said a few times we'll come back. We didn't know how long to wait. You don't want to do it too soon, but you don't want to wait too long. I don't want you to have forgotten the first one when we get to the second one. So let's be honest.
That's fair.
Likely.
Possible. Very possible.
Right now, so season 1 of Rewind Reviews, when was that now in relation to this? Like years? It's been like 2 or 3 years now, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So
2 years maybe, yeah.
So this is my concern. So it's finally time. I'm pulling the trigger. It's a movie I described as being nothing like the first one, but also like weirdly way more adult than the first one. I also, which is funny because I just checked out, 2019 it looks like we started it, so that is 2 years. It's a movie where when you watched the first one, Chris, you said you were mostly confused, and you also described it as having too many inappropriate jokes in it, and you said your exact response when I told you that it had gotten a U, meaning, universal for everyone, you just said, fuck off, which was perfect. We are tackling Short Circuit 2.
It's time.
A movie in which I saw before and loved before I even saw the first one. If you recall, I told the story on the first podcast of seeing that movie on a VHS that was given to me with a pile of old VHSs from my nan who worked at a video store, falling in love with it. Didn't even really know it was called Short Circuit, even though it literally says it in the title screen. Always called it just Johnny 5, and then discovering that there's another Johnny 5 movie was out there based on an advert on ITV for a screening of it. And then I was like, oh my God, this isn't the first one, which is so insane. When you watch this movie, you will not understand how Child Dan didn't understand this as a sequel. But yeah, I'm excited. I can't imagine you are. You agree? You acknowledge there was some charm to the first one, but were mostly baffled by it.
Yeah, I wasn't, huge on it. But that's fine. I'm looking forward to seeing the sequel. I'm very intrigued. So no, I am looking forward to it.
How well do you remember the first one at this stage? Have I picked the right timing?
Yeah, I think so. Roughly, I might watch the trailer or refresh myself, or I probably won't watch it again. But I think well enough for this to be fine for us to do.
Sweet, I'm very excited. I love this movie to this day. I have no idea if when I watch it with a critical eye, I'm going to come away with the same positive thoughts. But I certainly, obviously, we're going to have to tackle the issue again. That's going to be.
Yeah, I remember a lot of my thoughts being, taken up with that.
with
the inappropriateness, yeah.
With the guy putting on brown makeup to play an Indian character and putting on an accent. Yeah, it's not appropriate, Chris. It's a bad thing. It's a real shame because these are otherwise two very charming movies from my childhood, but they are nevertheless deeply hindered by some very inappropriate casting. We'll see, I guess, how that works. Because a little teaser for you, Chris. You know how he was kind of a supplemental character in the previous movie to Steve Guttenberg's character?
Yeah.
Little tease for you now. He's the main character in this next one.
Yeah, I remember you saying at the time.
So prepare for more of a very dodgy Indian accent.
Yeah, because the accent's the problem.
Yeah, well, and the rest of it. Yeah. I feel bad for Fisher Stevens. He's actually a very fine actor. He just, just a very unfortunate situation with that. He's very good in Friends. He's that therapist that Phoebe dates that the rest of the gang
he's
don't
great.
like.
A lot of people. I kind of potentially fall under the camp of, actually no, I love Paul Rudd. Gets away with it, but if it weren't for Paul Rudd's charm, I'd be like, should have been him. She ended up with.
You might be thinking of Hank Azaria's character, the scientist.
Oh, I think I am actually. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Fisher Stevens' character is Phoebe is going out with Phoebe for like maybe 2 episodes, not even that. Maybe it's just 1, and he's a therapist and he keeps therapizing all the friends, and it just
oh yeah, no, that was good. I think that is just 1. Yeah,
and it's like every time they all at first like him and find him charming, but as he slowly makes them all think too deeply about their own behaviors because he's a therapist, they all slowly start to get quite bitter towards him, but towards the end they're all just like, we hate him. It's a good episode.
There's a scene where he's like, see you guys, and they're all just literally like, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. And he's wonderful in that role. He's genuinely very good. So it's a real shame Fisher Stevens, I think, I think it hurt his career in the long run. I think he'd be a more famous actor now had this not been in his repertoire. But there you go. So come back next week, or if you're listening to this on Spotify or wherever and you've not yet signed up to the Patreon, you can hear it right now if you head over and give as little as $1 a month. Obviously, youtube.com/nothingbutstatic. That's Nothing But Static UK. Patreon.com/nothingbutstatic. We're also available on Twitter. I'm at Dan Doolan. Chris is at C Billingham with 2 M's. And I guess also be gearing up for it's worth adding now, that will be the last episode of this series of Rewind Reviews, Short Circuit 2, which means whatever movie Chris chooses will be at the end of that one will be the opening movie of our next series, which won't be for another sort of 20 weeks or so towards the end of the year. As we cover Avatar. So if you listen to us and you really enjoyed our coverage of Avatar, get ready for that. If you didn't listen to us reviewing Avatar through our podcast, Analyzing Avatar, what a great time to catch up on the 20 episodes of that are already out. iTunes, Spotify,
definitely.
This YouTube channel, it's there. If you like Avatar and you enjoy hearing us talk about movies and you want to hear us talk about Avatar, you can go find that and you can hear us talk about that. We're obviously getting into some of the juicier stuff with Avatar in the 2nd season as well, which I'm very excited to cover some of that stuff. So yeah, in a couple of weeks' time, it's crazy to think we're already back to Avatar. It feels like we just started doing Rewind Reviews like a few weeks ago, which I suppose we did, but like, yeah. So yeah, I guess we'll see you guys in a week's time for Short Circuit. Do you want to wrap it up, Chris?
Definitely. I've been Chris Billingham.
I've been Dan Doolan.
And this review has been Rewound.